Hi, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter from Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. Thanking all of you for joining us again. We are growing exponentially. It's fantastic. A new feature that we wanted to tell you about, because everything's 100% free, is when you go to our website, si.com/NFL/Raiders, upper right hand corner, there's a place that says newsletter. You sign up there, it's 100% free. We don't sell your information. We're not out there using it for anything other than we send you an email 3 times a week with our biggest stories to make sure you never miss another huge Raiders story again, especially going into the off season where people maybe don't pay as much of attention. You don't want to miss any big stories. Go do that. Sign up for that. Trust me, it'll be worth it. And as like everything we do, it's 100% free. Let's welcome in our guy, the one and only, one of the most terrific attorneys, great journalist, the wonderful Johnny Guitars, as the fans call him. How you doing, Johnny Guitars?
I'm doing good. All of a sudden, we've gone from the heat of the summer before camp to the final week of the regular season. We've got notes, we got things to look at after the season as far as our predictions. I ran into those the other day. Some were okay, some were not. That's part of the fun. But here we
Mm-hmm.
go. We're circling the wagons. Week 18, final game. Relatively big one for the Raiders. Relatively. It's not playing for a playoff game. It is playing to stick a little bit of a streak and extend it against one of the bigger rivals. And it's probably to position the franchise for the next step. As you know, that step's coming pretty quick. But first, one more to play.
John, I want to talk about the job. I mean, Jim Harbaugh is clearly a candidate. He's a great coach. No one's questioning that at all. Gruden, great coach, Super Bowl winner. And then there's AP and Champ Kelly, who I think are the no-brainer decision to go hire. I That's not discrediting. I said yesterday on the podcast, if somebody disagrees with me, I'm not God. I don't care. That's fine. And you know what? You can make a case for Gruden. You can make a case for Jim Harbaugh. But my case is this: you don't have to be the greatest commander of X's and O's to be a great head coach. You have to be a CEO and a motivator of men. You got to be able to assemble a staff, which no one seems to remember. AP is doing this with the staff he inherited and lost 2 offensive guys, cut a bunch of the playbook out, no OTAs, no mini camps, nothing. And then he loses Josh Jacobs, which no one's talking about how big of a loss that was. Again, we're going to get into a bunch of issues today that have nothing to do with coaching. But your thoughts, excuse me, your thoughts on the process. What do you think? What would you do if you're Mark Davis?
This isn't college football where we've seen a huge advantage to potentially having an NFL level play caller. Steve Sarkisian, Jim
Right.
Harbaugh. That's not the case here. What you need at the NFL level is somebody that can be organized, somebody that can instill some discipline and command some respect. It doesn't need to be X and O's. These are not the same days of the NFL we've seen in the past. You watch just the press coverage this week. You watch Hard Knocks. The Dolphins call their coach Mike. The Browns, AJ Brown is I'm sorry, the Eagles, AJ Brown is talking about Nick. This is stuff not on the map, not on the map for John Robinson, not on the map for Bill Parcells,
Right.
not on the map all over the place for Bud Grant. So it's a whole different era. What you need out of a head coach at the NFL level is not the same. It has evolved. Antonio Pierce, I think, is a humongous plus in that he played in, relatively speaking, the modern era. We talked before about people need to remember who he played for. He played for a guy that wasn't going by Tom. He wasn't going by Tom. No. So what you've seen here is an organic process of a guy finding his own way in the universe lining up. He is an NFL head coach without any doubt. The no-brainer is for the Raiders to hire him. There's a no-brainer there. If they don't, somebody else surely will. And we've also talked about before today the credit, really more credit that he needs for figuring out that maybe less is more. This coach is not a fit for what I want to do. We're going to send him out during the season. We're going to trim back the playbook. That does not mean, as you point out, that the entire staff would be coming back next year. In fact, I would
No.
think that a head coach, if he gets the position, basically
Yep.
starts with the approach of we're going to interview for everything. Now, in reality, we're probably going to keep a good bit of the core, a good bit of stuff that
Yeah.
aligns.
They
But we're
will keep a bunch of them. Yeah.
yeah,
Because it's a
and
good staff. There's just a couple of weak points.
yeah, and you have to. You have to. If you've learned nothing else from watching years of Hard Knocks in a season with, which again, folks should check out if they haven't, it's basically a season long Hard Knocks. If you've learned nothing else, you've seen how much damage can be done by a staff if you've got somebody pulling in a different direction or somebody not pushing with everybody else. You talk about the tush push. Every single coach and staff member needs to get behind the head coach and push all in the same direction. We saw what does not work. We saw Jason Garrett lay that out years ago on that show really clearly. There's not a whole lot of that by the looks of it in Las Vegas right now. But you are giving Antonio Pierce, he's basically got a half a hand tied behind his back just because of the nature of the situation he stepped into. I'm not his agent. We don't need to sell him. The market will sell him. If the Raiders don't
Mhm.
move on him, somebody else is going to say, hey, we would like to interview him to be our head coach. No doubt about that.
Yep. I agree. I want to say something to our listeners real quick. If you're just listening to the audio on Spotify or Apple, you're not noticing this, but if you're watching the video, I'm not eating. I keep putting lozenges in my mouth. Yesterday, traveled for the day to LA for my next deep dive article, spent several hours talking, and then flew back. So I'm just throat. I apologize. I don't want anybody to think I'm being disrespectful on them.
These are my guys. If we're scoring at home, this is my go to fisherman's friend. I've gone probably 8 or 10 years. That's my ride. If we're talking lozenges, it's that time of year. Folks traveling, you're probably going to need them. You need them as badly as the Raiders need Josh Jacobs. As the Raiders have fallen out of the playoff contention at the end, there's no doubt that that's an underreported or undernoticed story because the Raiders don't get a ton of attention nationally because they're not at the top of the NFL, as we know, for good reasons like winning. But make no mistake, that that's probably the straw that broke the camel's back as far as one more injury that you can't take. You can't take
Mhm.
a top flight player out of any team and have them be the same. And we will mark these
No.
words. Somebody who is right now in the mix, going to the playoffs, thinks they have a chance to make a run. There's probably going to be one more major injury, and that's going to just knock that team out too. So it's part of the game, but um, this is probably a little bit better team at the end of the year than we've seen, only because Jacobs hasn't been out.
I
Fair to
agree
say.
with you. All right. I want to talk about Max Crosby, who I think is the best defensive player in the National Football League. I know there are several people who agree with me, not just fans and journalists, but I mean people around the league. But they've told me his thing is he's not on a good team, and it's just the way that it goes. Max Crosby's a Raider. He wants to stay a Raider. This guy is an elite player. He's a game changer. How much do you think it hurts him not being on a great team? Or even forget great, just being on a playoff team.
Yeah, I think it hurts a little bit. You know, TJ Watt is a comparison. TJ Watt is with one of the gold standard franchises, of course,
Mhm.
just like the Raiders are. I do think there is a difference because he's on the East Coast. I
Yep,
just, if you,
100%.
if you flipped Watt and you flipped Crosby as far as attention and hype, there would be more his way. I'm not sure that we know quite the extent of the knee injury that he's dealt with. There was an article talking about it. We don't really know how that's affected him. But as far as current impact on each play and each snap, whether it's Mike McDaniel that we saw in Hard Knocks talking about every snap, they've got to account for him, or whatever game we've seen, and hopefully he'll go out with a bang to finish the year. I think he's impacting the game as much as anybody in the front seven right now. I don't know what happens from here, only because every team is different and every year is different. But I don't know that we would see a quick decline in Max Crosby. There's some things that he does before the snap, after the snap. There's things that are going on inside of his football mind that remind me a bit of Ray Lewis. Here's what I mean by that. As Ray Lewis got older, his mind got so much better, he arguably didn't slip that much because he could account for a whole lot of the loss of the physical ability that is just natural with Father Time. Crosby to me looks like a guy that's going to have some of that. I think he's going to be effective for a long time, and he's certainly right in the mix and could easily be argued as the most effective and best defensive player in the sport right now. For
And people
sure.
don't even think about he's not, I mean, he's 60 to 70%. And,
Yeah, that
you
don't
know,
know. That's what it's hard
oh,
to. That's what it's hard to even know. And it's just not a guy that's going to fly a flag and say, "Hey, look how hurt I am." Maybe we'll learn a little more about it in the off season. And I understand that's part of the game. But when we're trying to evaluate how effective is the guy, when some of us think back to Howie Long, Reggie White, when we think back to Bruce Smith, when we think back to different guys, when we see the freak of nature that is Aaron Donald, which is guy in the middle of the field that at the front of the, on the line of scrimmage that moves like a linebacker, we think, okay, these guys are affecting the way the game is played. Crosby is doing that in a unique way, but I wonder if he doesn't get enough credit for some of the thinking that he's doing and some of the intangible stuff, not just the physical running, tackling, breaking off blocks. It looks like there's a little more going on up there, which makes me think he's going to continue to be effective for a longer period than some where it just goes on and then drops.
he's not even at his best yet, which is phenomenal to me. All right, I want to switch gears a little bit. And because no matter who comes in as coach, this is not a rebuild at all. There are positions that they need to go address for sure. But there's no rebuild here. And if you bring in um, anyone other really than AP, there's going to be some element of a rebuild. Now, you're not a Raider fan. I'm not, but I'm clearly tapped into the Raider Nation. These people are worn out. This franchise has sold them. Um, they have sold them that it's just win, baby, and they haven't. The two coaches that take them to the playoffs, Del Rio and Bisaccia, they fire them. Um, I told someone the other day, it's almost like battered women syndrome, which I'm not in any way precluding or I'm comparing that losing football games compares to a woman being abused. I'm not saying that. Please hear that. As a person who had a sister that was a victim of domestic violence, I can tell you I don't make light of that. That being said, though, they have just been so beat up. Keep getting sold. Just win, baby. And they don't. Just win, baby. They don't. Let's move to Vegas. Just win. And they don't. That I think it would be malpractice to do a rebuild. And Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler are brought in here. And Mark Davis said, no, not a rebuild. We're going to continue. Remember, they were in the playoffs. We're going to continue going forward. And oh, by the way, they went backwards. It's not fair to these fans, John.
No,
You got all these weapons on defense, offense, special teams. Can they upgrade? Yes. Do they need to upgrade? Yes. But this is not a rebuild. Do you agree or disagree with me?
no, I do. When you've got Adams, Jacobs, and Crosby, and then you've got some other guys that maybe can ascend.
Holton Miller, the left tackle.
So when you've got those pieces, no, it's not a rebuild. The danger they have, it's somewhat of a danger, is well, first of all, it's great that they don't have Russell Wilson. Let's start there. But if you get to a coach or GM outside and they want to make a change at the quarterback position, it's not that it's a rebuild, but it's like, wait a minute, is that where we're going? If somebody was rebuilding, they would pretty much trade all those guys for, if they were going to get a maximum value, they'd get a ton of value, and we'd be rebuilding and seeing how it turns out in 2026. That's not
Yeah, because remember when a rebuild is 3 years. So
yeah,
if they come in and I'm
That's not.
telling you, that would be malfeasance with this franchise
Yeah.
if you're taking 3 years. I
It,
just
it would be another promise that's broken. So promise, get the hopes up. The promise gets broken. Back around. Promise from the franchise. The fans get their hopes up. Knock down, back around. That's the repetitive syndrome that needs to be broken. Yeah, that would be a mistake. And even if the Raiders decide to get another quarterback or try another quarterback, draft another quarterback, I don't see. Yeah, this is not a rebuild. There's too much top end talent. There's not like one or two guys. They've got guys at different spots on the field that are absolute killer playmakers. They're guys that win and make a difference. Filling in the holes or filling in the blanks is one thing. And it's not that we would expect Aiden O'Connell to make a big jump next year, but this does not look like a guy that's going to be prone to have a big backslide. So the quarterback production, I would think, is reasonable to expect somewhere in the same zone or hopefully a better situation, a little
I
more.
think I think he would get better, but I still think you go draft a quarterback and let him compete. Let the best guy win it.
Yeah, that would seem to be by far the best move. So I'm with you, and I don't get the impression that the folks around the sport think that the Raider job is a rebuild. I don't think
No.
so. Nor do they have some kind of albatross hanging around like, what do we do with Justin Fields and what do we do with all these draft picks? Those are not the situations. I think that the person that would come in or stay is going to know that this is not a rebuild process. This is, and it's not as silly as playoffs or bust next year, or we want to contend for the division. But in reality, that's exactly where the Raider franchise is. When you look who's on the team, and you look what they have coming back, for sure, that's what they should be looking for. They're not looking to rebuild. No.
All right. I'm going to say something that I have not written yet, but I had a conversation recently with a player, and they said to me, talking about AP, you know, and this person speaks very highly of Mark Davis. There is nothing, they don't dislike Mark at all. I want to make sure that's clear. But they said, don't tell us that the franchise is all about the players. We listen to the players. We're not like any other franchise. You guys matter. And then for the second time in 2 years, ignore us and who we think should get the coach. Again, we got other things to talk about to get to. I don't want to make this all about AP, but this is a legacy defining hire for Mark Davis. If he doesn't go get AP, then that's twice in 2 years he's ignored his locker room. And he's not like other owners. Bob Kraft doesn't give a crap what his Patriots players think. It's about the direction of but this franchise sells that. Once a Raider, always a Raider. I mean, part of the reason he fired Josh McDaniels was his guys were not having any fun. He can go do whatever he wants. Your opinion doesn't matter, mine doesn't. But if he does not go get AP and the next guy fails, that is going to be his legacy. If he gets AP and AP fails, in 3 years he goes and makes a change, everyone's like, oh man, Mark really tried. All right, let's go swing for the fences. John, you are an attorney. You work in communication every single day. You are not a guy who's afraid to disagree with me. Where am I wrong in that assessment?
I don't think necessarily wrong. I think what the thing to point out is if the Raiders go away from Antonio Pierce, they are going to immediately risk the chemistry of their team relative to the owner and relative to whoever's coming in. There's going to be built in concern or a little animosity immediately. Yes, these are employees. We all get that. But they are going to really, I think the main thing I would be worried about is you're potentially sacrificing the chemistry there. And if you bring in a guy who is a successful head coach, who was successful in the NFL before, but who had multiple guys retire before he was ultimately fired, that is a risk of chemistry. So if you've got potentially Jim Harbaugh on one end of it, which is not ideal chemistry wise, and you've got another guy that the players want to play for, it's really a no brainer. They both can be successful coaches in the NFL. There's no
Yeah.
doubt that this situation is much more akin to keeping Antonio Pierce, given all that's gone on and all the momentum going on behind him. If the Raiders go another direction, they throw all that momentum out the window, they pull a wild card, and they immediately disrupt some chemistry.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. All right, John, I got some stuff I want to get into. You and I are big fans of Hard Knocks. We love it. And boy, did Hard Knocks become an infomercial for Lamar Jackson to win a
A little
big
bit.
award.
Yeah, I mean, when you saw, first of all, what a contrast to see the Dolphins preparing for this game in Baltimore. They're ready. They think they've got a shot to win. It starts going sour fast, real sour. But what you saw in Lamar Jackson and hearing the coaches talk about it, Mike McDaniel said, look, we haven't seen anything like this in the league since Michael Vick, and this guy's probably a little better because he's bigger. That's just running. That's just half the equation. I think Lamar Jackson streamed up to the top of the MVP list with that performance. And when people get a look behind the scenes through Hard Knocks, and make no mistake, folks, as much as you love it and we love it, the people around the sport who look and vote on those things, they tune in when they can too. This is, for some people, the biggest exposure and the most inside exposure they're going to get to Jackson all year before the season ends. It was impressive. And there's something about the way NFL Films does it. The guys he looks quicker and more agile on film than he does on TV. But when you hear the amount of non-blusterous respect that Vic Fangio and Mike McDaniel have, and all those guys in Miami had, and he just destroyed them. It looks very difficult to stop. And this is even without his backup tight end, or I'm sorry, without the starting tight end, who of course is gone. And before Dalvin Cook comes in there, which potentially is a little chemistry disruptor itself. I thought that's a surprising move myself because they're going so well. But the main point is Jackson is nearly video game unstoppable right now, to quote one of the Dolphin coaches.
I want to talk to you about Lamar. So you know this. I've always been a humongous fan of his. I think he's an elite talent. People like to say he was just a runner. I said, well, he's just a runner because they don't have any receivers for him. They now have done that. Do you think he has usurped Patrick Mahomes as the best quarterback in the NFL?
Right now, I think so. Yeah, I'm not sure historically how amazing this is going to look because we've seen a guy that was asked to run a run first offense and ran it very successfully. They really nearly got into the Super Bowl, got a couple looks at it, right? Then he's asked to completely change gears. But the thing is, he's more than capable of doing so. So some of us are old enough to remember John Elway, and we saw maybe some of that, but not anywhere near to this extent. If anything, it was kind of stop running around doing everything and start handing the ball off. I don't remember the last time we've seen somebody make such a change from really, yes, you're a dual threat quarterback, but can you master and elevate to the top of the sport doing each thing? Michael Vick did not do that. He really did not do that. We haven't seen anybody do that. And the idea that somebody like Ben Roethlisberger or Peyton Manning would all of a sudden switch from top flight passing to running, it wasn't even in the possibility scheme. Peyton Manning can't run from here to there, as they talk about all the time they're doing those games. This is version 2.0 of the dual threat quarterback because he's doing both things at the top of the sport. Mahomes should never be asked to or have to do that incredible amount of running with the scheme that they had, the Roman scheme that was successful. So I don't even think he's going to have a chance to do it. But right now, there's no question. It's Lamar Jackson's NFL. He's at the top of it right now. And I don't think he's done, at least for this year. It's remarkably impressive. But to go from all the way as a running guy to all the way as a good a passer as there is, he's the guy.
All right, let's turn our attention now. I want to talk to you about Justin Fields. The Bears have to make a decision. Players have been very vocal. They want to keep him. I'm hearing from people in the organization, you know who some of the people in the organization I know are, that the organization from the coaching level wants to stick with Justin Fields. It's a matter of what the GM wants to do. What do you think is the value of a Justin Fields?
Well, the value is it's not that he can be a Lamar Jackson, but he's got obviously dual threat ability, as we know.
Mhm.
He's got a big arm. It's not the fastest release in the world, but he looks like, if you're talking like a 5 tool player in baseball, he's got 4.5 tools at least. So
Mhm.
I'm long on Fields as long as everybody is aligned. So if your coach is aligned, your GM is aligned, your players are aligned, the light is green, you got to go forward. Of course, the interesting things come up with the contract, and also what would people be willing to offer? Are they willing to offer a first round pick? Are they willing to offer a top 10 pick, which would
Right.
on that would I mean, the Bears could have 3 of the first top whatever picks. Those are things that have to be considered because they're potentially franchise changing. If the Bears somehow have 3 first round picks, call me crazy, they're probably trying to move one of them to have 2 first round picks next year and not repeat what the Patriots once did, but build an incredible pipeline. So I do think they need to consider that. At the same time, if you can get 2 very effective playmaking, one on probably each side of the ball, or maybe um, a difference making offensive lineman and Harrison, for example, the Bears of 2024, not much like what we've seen the last couple years.
Now, here's what I like about Fields, and in the interest of full disclosure, I know him, covered him, and wonderful kid, great talent, great leader, super smart. I have no issues if the Raiders want to go get him. I just know, talking to people who know him, he's going to want that 40, 45, $50 million a year deal. Now he's got 2 years left. One of them would be a fifth year option, but still, if you're the Raiders and can get him cheap enough, then you go and say, okay, we'll take him. We know we're going to have 2 years with him. We'll pick up the fifth year right away. And he's still relatively expensive before I have to go give him that 45, $50 million deal to let him prove who he is. He's a guy, you put him with a Devontae Adams, you put him with this team, Michael Mayer, the weapons. You put him with this defense. I think he has an opportunity to be really special. I'm not saying that's what I would do. Right now, we're looking at every option, but I think Fields is somebody the Raiders at least have to kick the tires on, and we know that Champ Kelly is very aware of him from his time in Chicago. Your thoughts?
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, the Raiders would want to find out what it would take. We know the Washington football team might be in there. There's If Fields is available, I'm thinking there's probably as many teams not publicly saying what would it take to get him as there would be public interest from this team or that team.
Now,
Absolutely.
let me just say this. I talked to somebody, um, and you know my connections with the Bears. I, I talked to somebody very close to the situation that told me they think Atlanta's the team to beat. That they're not sure the Bears would move on, but that if the Bears decide to move on, Atlanta is big time interested in him. So I'm just saying all that to go on. Keep going.
Yeah, I mean, they'd have to be. Look, Atlanta made a big mistake not drafting Justin Fields.
Yeah,
And
he's
one
from
way to,
Georgia.
yeah, I
I
mean,
think he's in Kennesaw.
fell into their hands. I think he's from the other side of town, but I mean, when it fell that he fell for them to draft, it was a no-brainer. They overthought it and took Kyle Pitts, who is a fine tight end, not great, but cannot and will never affect the game at the NFL level like a quarterback. A quarterback is not a starting pitcher, but it's closer to that than it's ever been.
Mhm.
They blew it. So I'm just thinking if the Falcons would have a chance to remedy and try to right the ship of a franchise that's gone backward, for sure you would think they'd be at the top of the list. But all eyes really are going to be on the Bears. I'm just curious what people would offer and what it would actually take for them to seriously consider making a move. Otherwise, you stick with Fields, you take that option, you go ahead and draft a quarterback because again, we're just going to start doing that pretty much every year and this is a big quarterback year and you go forward. your football team is going to be better with 2 first-round picks next year unless you blow it. They're not going to blow
Right.
it. They're going to take guys
Yeah,
that are good.
can you imagine if they decide to keep Fields? They can trade number one, and maybe I think their second pick is 7, 6, 7. They could
10.
10. It's 10. They could parlay that into four more first round picks. And I mean, set their franchise up like Jimmy Johnson with the Herschel Walker trade. This is mammoth. I was talking to a general manager today on the phone when I was in California, and or yesterday, I guess. But and we were just talking about the Bears situation, and he said to me, if I'm not 100% convinced he's not the guy, I'm keeping him, because if I can get four more first rounders out of this in a couple of seconds, even if he's not, I've got weapons to go get players all over the field, so I can go sign a free agent or whatever. I thought that was fascinating to me. And again, if Champ Kelly says no, I mean, and he's named the GM, he's got to be able to have the leeway to do whatever he wants, and I think you trust him. All right, let's get to our four big picks this week.
I mean, they're all over the place, aren't they? They're basically playoff games. The featured foursome, no doubt. Texans at Colts. Winner makes playoff. Loser makes vacation reservations. We know what happened last week with the Raiders and the Colts. We don't really know what's going to happen with Houston. Houston's such a good feel-good story. I want a good ending here. I like the surprise, the Texans, because we
I
know
do
the
too.
Colts.
Is
We know
is
the
is it in Texas?
no. It's in Indianapolis, I believe.
Yeah,
We
Will Anderson though right now is just playing out of his mind. Yeah, I'm going to go with the Texans too. Reluctantly, I should go with Indiana, but I'm not. I'm with the Colts. I'm going to go with Texans.
we know the Colts' history in these games, so they got to be nervous up there. Now Buffalo at Miami is also critically important. It's getting a little wild for Miami. They're getting a little injured. They have a horrible off-field distraction with the house on fire earlier this week. Buffalo at Miami. I don't think this one ends well. Buffalo
Buffalo.
steals
Yeah, Buffalo. I
it.
don't think it's a steal. I mean, I know what I was told by Shula, every win on the road is a steal, but I think Buffalo just goes in and punches them in the face.
Miami's on their heels a bit. Everything they've done so far this year is being tested. I'm concerned how injured they are. Jacksonville at Tennessee, spoiler city, music city. That's what it looks like. Jaguars, that thing got off track. They got a chance.
Titans.
They got a chance. Oh boy, the spoil continues. You know I'm going with the Low Countries team. I got to go with the Jaguars. They got to reverse the course and turn this thing around. The guy with the big head, the guy with the big hair, hopefully back. But there's so much need here.
Now,
And
let me
this is
just
the
say
deep
something here.
rival.
Let me say something here. I'm going on Trevor not playing. So if Trevor plays, I'm going to go with the Jags.
I'm impressed with how speedy ATN is, the running back there. He is very,
He's
very quick.
he's special.
Nobody, it's not your eyes, folks. He's that quick. Chicago at Green Bay, no brainer. The Packers are developing into a pretty good story.
Yeah.
There's some talent. There's always an edge. There's some guys playing for Fields on the other side. I'm going with a good story again. I think the Packers by less than 4.
I think Packers win it. I think it's super close. Like a field goal to end the game wins it. I would not be shocked if Chicago wins it. And if this was in Chicago, I would take Chicago. So I'm going to go with Green Bay, but a Chicago win would not surprise me.
It looks like a great week overall. And of course, we've got the finale for the Raiders. If you want that score, I'll get this wrong again. I've got one or two real close, but I'm ready to get this one wrong like I did last week. I see this one as, yes, we all know about the streaks. We all know how many the Raiders have won in a row against the Broncos. We all know this stuff. And we also know pretty much doesn't have anything to do with this year, except maybe the last year, maybe the last two. So I know what you're thinking. It's too good to be true. Put that aside. This is a game the Raiders win 23-17. There's not a chance that
Okay, I'm
Stidham.
gonna throw an extra point in this week. National championship. I don't think Washington has a chance. Your thoughts?
I've seen a lot of Washington this year, including very, very late. There was a game earlier this year where they were in serious trouble, and it was like, whoa, this is about to end. And they got a pretty fortunate bounce and turnover, and then they took that game and went away with it. Michael Penix is an interesting guy to watch. He throws the ball. Sometimes it looks like he's throwing punts because they just float and they're so well timing. I think that's the one thing to watch is what is the timing? Is it disrupted? And we should know that pretty early. I don't think that Washington is a dual threat team. I don't think they can run and pass as needed. This has all been building. The mountain has been building. It will forever be mired in massive controversy, if not completely forfeited or vacated before July 1st of 2024. But Monday night, I think Michigan is probably 10 points better than Washington.
Going to be fascinating thing to watch. All right, John, I appreciate you. It's great to talk to you again. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you're listening to Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast, part of the Fans First Sports Network. Check us out. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter, si.com/NFL/Raiders. Go there, check it out. Don't forget to check us out on Spotify, on Apple, and all of that. On Instagram, Hondo SR. Twitter, you can find me at Hondo Carpenter. Thanks a lot for being with us, John, and we'll see you all again tomorrow.